Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Martinson. I'm the Senior Extension Associate with Cornell University in viticulture and also the leader of the Northern Grapes Project. Today we have our final Northern Grapes Project webinar of the winter season. And today the focus is going to be on making money and winery profitability. We're fortunate to have two speakers today, Gregg McConnell from Farm Credit East, who runs the Winery Benchmark program. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit about that from Gregg. And Miguel Gomez, who's doing some studies on customer satisfaction and tasting room sales as part of the Northern Grapes Project. Again, this is our final webinar of the season. And we really appreciate all the response we've gotten from this, and I'd love to hear your feedback. We will have a exit survey and a link to that at the end of the program. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn this over then to Gregg McConnell, who is an analyst with Farm Credit East here in New York, and also does other things for Farm Credit. So, Gregg, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, Tim, just let me know by chat or some other way if the sound is not coming through. And in a moment, Tim will put up the PowerPoint. But my background is that I'm a biologist by training. So I started out in the school as a animal science background. Spent 8 years in an animal science field, and then became a commercial loan officer for Farm Credit East, and worked in that capacity with many agricultural operations, including wineries. And then for the past 2 years, I've been a business consultant. And during that time, I have continued on as a director of the Winery Benchmark, which is a program where we collect and analyze many winery participants' data, produce a report, and hold a meeting once a year. And that background is there just to help you get an understanding of where I'm coming from, and that this discussion today, even though it will get technical from time to time, is not beyond each of you. I hope that I can present it in a simple way, even though some of the concepts are complex. My outline of this short presentation is that we're going to first of all just very, very briefly address the basic fundamentals of winery accounting. We're going to delve in a bit deeper with respect to the 5- and 10-year phase of the business when you start selling wine, how to analyze it, and we're going to do a little bit of budgeting from what we call the bottom up. So first of all, GAAP and tax requirements for accounting for wineries are not always the best for making management decisions. But on the other hand, cost accounting is the key, and yet it's hard to do it well. Now, for many wineries, what I've experienced is that when they do this, when they go into this mode of doing cost accounting, because it is sophisticated accounting, they make it very complex. And my advice to anyone on this call that is less than 10,000 cases of wine, which I would think is probably most of you, that you try to do what needs to be done without making it complicated, and your life will go better. And I'm going to click through these pretty quick, but we will try to dwell where we need to dwell, and then there'll be a question and answer at the end. First of all, a profit and loss statement for a winery might look something like this. And for most of you, you may be a partnership or a sole proprietor or an LLC. It'll look like this. You'll first see income minus the cost of goods sold. We abbreviate that with a COGS, cost of goods sold, minus the sales expenses minus overhead equaling net profit. Now notice if you do take an owner draw in all of those types of entities we just mentioned, it'll be what I call below the line. It won't show up on your tax return per se or on the P&L, profit and loss statement. But you need to account for that. And then at the end, at the bottom of that, we need to allocate that profit to debt or investment. But on today, we're going to actually simplify it even more. This what we call a 5-line income statement would work for many businesses, but particularly a winery where it's a C Corp or S Corp. In other words, we would include right in this line item, we would include the draws for the owners in here instead of showing it below, and we just lump the sales expenses in with it as well. It just keeps it nice and simple. Now, if you're interested in what's going on with cost of goods sold and how is this, what goes in there, is basically just your variable expenses. It would be the costs that are directly associated with producing the wine. So it would include, for instance, on labor, your winemaker salary and any wages for people who work directly in the wine cellar. Of course, it also includes all the stuff that goes into wine, the wonderful grapes, glass cork, label, etc. And then on the overhead, it's basically everything else, things like utilities, taxes, insurance, interest. Note that I don't show depreciation here in this list, but it would also be included here. So that's your basic primer of winery accounting, and we're going to use this in some examples. Now, in a typical winery startup, you're not going to deal with this type of accounting for the first 5 years. It's pretty much at the beginning, it's develop the vineyard and start doing some capital investing in various things like building your production area and buying the wine equipment, building the tasting room. But during the next 5 to 10 years, when you finally got a crop and you can produce wine, it becomes a real marketing push. That's the phase that you're in this particular phase, 5 to 10 years. You're going to see the first solid income of your business, in years 6, 7, and 8 probably. So this becomes a challenge because you really, really need to grow the top line, what we call the top line being the income side of things. But while you're doing it, it's hard to know if you've made a profit, and that's what today's conversation is all about. And not only are you interested in making a profit, and you may need to demonstrate a profit for your lender or other investors. The other feature of this stage of business is that you will need to build inventory. One of the common mistakes of winery business plans is that we know we have to build inventory, but we don't take the time to actually do a good job of estimating what kind of drain that will be on your equity. And then you get in a pinch and you have to go back to the lender or to get some other investors to come into the business. And another thing to keep in mind is that inventory is necessary to grow the sales. You can't sell from an empty shelf. And finally, how should you, if you had a chance to plan ahead for this, how should you finance this part of the business? First of all, inventory in this presentation will be we will consider it at cost. So the value of the inventory will be kept at cost. So it may be worth far more than the values that are on the balance sheet, but that's exactly how you should do it. So technically it's called lesser of cost or market, and I'll leave the word value out of it. So in accounting lingo, lesser of cost or market is what we do. But the idea is, here at the bottom, as an example, you would actually estimate what it cost your particular winery, not your neighbor, not the industry standard, but your particular winery, what it costs you to produce a case of wine on average. Now, in this example, I'm using some numbers that I'm familiar with for wineries that would be very small. Let's say 500 to 1,000 cases, somewhere in that ballpark. And if there were an accountant in the room here in the know, they would say, wow, these numbers are high, Gregg, and they are. That grape cost is probably slightly less than double what it might be at a larger winery. The labor costs as well. The supplies, you might ask, what is that? Supplies in this case would be things like sugar or yeast or enzymes, could be acids, things that go directly into the wine. But in this mock-up of a cost study, this particular imaginary winery came in at $67 per case. So we're going to run with an example. I tried to come up with a creative winery name, but it didn't work, so I'm just calling it John's Winery. he's going to sell let's just say he sold $60,000 a case last year, $60,000 of wine last year, and he sold 600 cases. I like easy math, so it's $100 a case, and that was probably a blend of retail and wholesale. And we've already said that he's estimating his cost to produce the wine at $67 a case. But in the middle of this example of the year last year, John, because he knew he'd have to grow the business, bottled 1,000 cases of wine. Well, you might ask, how do we know if John made a profit, and how do we get to that get to that number that we can demonstrate either to investors or to a lender? And oh, by the way, if he made a profit, did he actually cash flow or not? Well, let's see if we can figure this out. First of all, as typically happens, John, in this case, incorrectly conducted his first cost study. So he estimates the production cost too low at $40. But because he wants to sort of sketch out where he thinks he's at, he kind of lines it up and says, all right, I sold 600 cases, and to produce those 600 cases, I basically had to spend $40 to get there, and so therefore it leads me to a cost of goods sold of $24,000, resulting in a gross profit of $36,000. Well, what really happens when he sends it off to his accountant is his accountant applies that cost first to the beginning inventory, which I'm going to introduce a couple of new numbers for you in this example. As it so happens, John started the year with 500 cases of wine in inventory. He, as I already said, bottled 1,000 cases, and then at the end of the year, he ended the year at 900 cases of wine. So if we do the math, 1,500. He started at 500, added 1,000, so we're at 1,500 minus 9. Come back to he actually sold 600 cases. Well, if you follow the math here, this leads us to a conclusion of 20,000 at the beginning, 36,000 at the end, resulting in a number of 50,000. But if you do the math back to what that comes out to on a per case basis, you can instinctively see that something went terribly wrong. So when John sees the numbers from his accountant, he's dismayed because he thought he made a pretty good gross profit, but as it turns out, he only made a $9,000 gross profit. So John goes back to the drawing board and does another cost study, and he figures out what he was missing. He was missing some key costs. He gets it in there and he gets it right, and he again sort of pencils out where he thinks he should be. And if you do the math between the 67 and the 600, it leads us to a conclusion that cost of goods sold should be $40,200, leading to this gross profit of just shy of $20,000. So if we do the math through the actual calculation, his accountant is going to apply this number at the beginning and the end, and lo and behold, it does come out at the right number. If you backfill from the cost of goods sold, you come back to a reasonable estimate of his COGS on a per case basis. So now we're feeling pretty comfortable with John's analysis. It actually comes in exactly the same. And as a result, when we finish the analysis, his accountant applies all the overhead and he made his first profit. So John is very excited. He's a new winery in his maybe 6th or 7th year. He's made his first profit, and he's going to take this to the bank and hopefully get what he needs. But in reality, the other factor is he needs to deal with whether he had cash flow or not. So with the same set of facts, same circumstances, what really happened on a cash flow basis was a bit different. Because John built 1,000 cases of wine at $67, he actually had $67,000 of cash costs to deal with. So his cash flow after production is negative $7,000, still had to cover the overhead. And then we have to introduce this pesky reality that he had to cover his loan payments, all leading down to a bottom line cash deficit of $37,000. In this should have not been a surprise to John. His business plan actually should have dealt with that. And what we call this is basically the inventory build. So what you should get out of this part of the talk is that generating profits versus cash flow are two different things, and that to generate cash flow as a startup winery would be extraordinary, number one. And to do so, you must either be extremely profitable or you have to level off inventory growth, the exact thing you don't want to do because you're trying to grow the business. I have a couple slides here about inventory that I'm not going to spend really any time on, and if needed, Tim can circulate a PDF of this PowerPoint, but just basically there's ways to help estimate inventory. And to do so would be good to do before you go through this phase of the business so you can be prepared. Now I'd like to go, since I only have 5 minutes left before Q&A or thereabouts, I'd like to go through a process of setting sales targets for yourself. If you're in that phase of the business between 5 and 10 years, you kind of ask yourself, how much profit do I need just to break even, just to get to where John is here in our imaginary winery? And how do you set a sales target and figure out if it's reasonable? Well, budgeting from the bottom up is a way that we try to do this in the consulting profession. And you start with what we would call the bottom of the profit and loss statement. So you start out with overhead. You're going to definitely deal with the owner draw if that's needed. And so far we're including that in overhead, so we won't take those on separately. And this part here, principal and interest of debt payments, is also at the bottom. So when we do this, we're going to have a revised profit and loss statement. This would be almost exactly how a lender would look at it. They would basically do the same thing we looked at before, except for we do a funny thing called adding interest expense back, coming out to this funny word called EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And then we use that number to subtract all debt payments from there. I'll show you that again. So let's say in our imaginary situation, we have these loan payments here totaling that much, $22,500 for per year. So if you start from the bottom, you say, well, I've got to cover that. The lender's not willing maybe to wait for that, so I've got to do that. The overhead's reality. That's my taxes, insurance, etc. So that leads us to a conclusion that we need a gross profit of $40,500 on this imaginary winery. Well, if we use the same example as we had before, $67 of cost to produce wine and $100 per case of sales, this would derive us to a $33 a case gross profit. So we use that to determine that we're going to need to sell 1,230 cases. So that actually helps us build the rest of the balance sheet based on that number. But it all is derived from these bottom two lines getting you to a gross profit, and then you figure out where it takes you from there. And what this would look like on that same lender's financial statement, or income statement, profit and loss statement, would be something like this. And this is where we had $18,000 for overhead, but let's show it with the interest in there, and then we add it back here. And the idea is we have determined successfully what it would take to break even, meaning coming to zero after paying our debts. Now, in the real world, you may choose to chase this sales number through either the retail or the wholesale channel. And so if this mix is going to change, your $100 a case target will change as well. So you're going to do some kind of formula, or you're going to do some sort of iterative type of calculation where you're going to play with the numbers and come out with the values you need to hit in the retail sales area as well as the wholesale sales area to figure out where you need to be. So, as a result of this exercise, we've established that this particular winery needs to sell $123,000 to break even at $100 a case. And yet we understand instinctively if we use wholesale sales to reach this target, in other words, we grow that more than the retail, then you're going to have to increase the case count above and beyond what this initial target was, because our price per case is going to be lower. But at least now we can make a feasible plan, and this is the key. Can we get our staff on board, and is this a reasonable plan that everyone buys into, including the lender? So the key concepts in this whole presentation would be, don't forget to build in the cost of increasing inventory during years 5 to 10. And that may go on, if you have success, to be a problem for you between even years 10 and 20, depending on how fast and how far you grow the business. But that'd be a good problem to have, I think. And then also have a plan to finance this. And I would recommend very strongly that you not seek an operating loan at this stage of the business, because this inventory level will be permanent. You should have an operating loan only for cyclical needs. This is not cyclical. That inventory will stay there. So I would recommend either preserving some cash or preserving some mortgage equity to take on this financing when you need it. The other key takeaways are you really need a good record-keeping system and accounting plan that will tell your story accurately. And finally, vineyard economics will lead you to different profitability metrics. We don't have time today to talk about this, but in my experience and others in the field, low yield in your vineyard results in extremely high-cost grapes, which translates to high-cost wine and lowers your gross profit percentage. So when I showed you that initial $40 a case of grape cost, I hope some of you were shocked, but in many cases that's exactly what we're dealing with, and even higher than that, because grape yields are so low. And finally, another good thing to remember is build the right size winery. When you do this, what I mean by that is if you can build a winery that is size sufficient to meet your first 5 years of needs, you should have a plan where you could expand it easily and enlarge the tasting room and or the production center. If you do that right from the start, it shouldn't cost you that much extra to be small and then grow bigger, but you won't get caught with overhead that's overhead expense or debt that is unattainable in the marketing scheme that you're going to try to exercise. So Tim, that's the presentation, and I've got time for questions, I think.
Okay, thank you, Gregg. I just have a comment here. Something I've heard from many wineries is as they are expanding and trying to get from maybe that 5,000 cases or 2,000 cases up to 15, 20,000 cases, that it's the expanding inventory that really does kill them. And I think I've heard that once you reach a certain level, there's you're profitable, or if you stay at your 4,000, 5,000 cases where you're doing everything yourself, you're profitable. But in the middle, there's this kind of trough where it's hard to get through it and grow to that from that 5,000 to 20,000 case sort of scenario. Can you comment on that on size in relation to winery profitability?
Yeah, and that basically echoes what I'm trying to present here, is that in general you're going to need to have at least a year's worth of inventory if you value it at cost, and in many cases it'll be up to a year and a half of inventory. So when you see that growth phase from, let's say, 5,000 cases to 20,000 cases, think about what that means about the timing of building that inventory. That inventory will oftentimes be anywhere from 1 to 3 years old. So if we instinctively understand what we're talking about, that's a huge drain on cash flow, and that's why it's such a challenge. So, are there any other questions from the group? And
yeah, Gregg, sorry I was muted there. Here's a couple about, we want you to go into a little bit more of the formula for retail and wholesale sales, and what the what the difference is there, and sort of ballparked about. Let's see. Somebody asked earlier on, is that in the wholesale or retail market? So if you could address that.
Yeah. I think the way to approach that is that many wineries are, I'm trying to find it here, many wineries are, let me see if I can get there. There we go. Many wineries run somewhere at the beginning between, 70 to 80% retail. And as the business grows, wholesale becomes more and more a part of that. And a typical wholesale gross margin would be somewhere between 10 and 20%. So as you can see, additional wholesale sales aren't bringing a huge amount to the bottom line. It becomes a volume game, still a needed thing. So this equation here is designed to kind of get you to the bottom of that. And if you say, well, I'm going to have to shoot for 60% wholesale sales, this equation helps you try to figure out what that means from a total case count.
Right, because typically wholesale you get half as much as you get retail.
Right.
Yeah. Here's one from, and I'll get to Tom's question about the wine club a little later, but here's one from Paul Dietman to everyone. Gregg, I appreciate you mentioning the difference between profit and cash flow. The terms confuse some people. Break-even cash flow is not going to be enough to get a loan, correct? There needs to be some excess cash flow to cover unexpected problems.
Boy, that's a good one,
I think that's
Paul.
a question, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, and I would say, having been a lender and dealing with this, there are times in a business where you can accept break-even cash flow, and during growth, I might accept that. But what you need to be able to do is project in the long run that the business model will generate, just as you described, some excess cash flow. So I think, and generally there, we're looking for 20 to 30% excess cash flow in the long run. But we will accept a 2 to 3 year period where break even is okay in many cases. Each lender will be different.
Okay, so get your business plans together. Last question here, and then Gregg, if you're willing to stay online and answer any questions that might come, type in any answers to questions that might come over the chat bar, that'd be great.
Sure.
Here's the last one from Tom Mincarelli. And I'm sure I'm butchering everybody's name here, but the question is an online wine club profitable?
Oh boy, is an online wine club profitable? Yes, I would say one of the up-and-coming things is what we call direct-to-customer, which means web sales either, and wine club is even better yet. It's like a pre-planned distribution of your wine. The way I like to describe it to people is you can invest energy in your wholesale sales, or you can at the same time invest energy in going direct to the customer and look at the profit potential in going direct to the customer. So I would say yes, direct to customer is the way to go. The only downside to it is you're going to have to deal with the upfront website costs, and as well the interstate legalities of shipping wine.
Yeah. Okay, I can't resist one. Here's one that just came in that I think is an interesting question. What's a reasonable salary for owners when beginning a startup?
Oh boy, that's a good one. And since this call covers wide regions, that would vary from place to place. And I would say I actually know many startup wineries where they took nothing out of the business. And if you can do that, I recommend it. And here's why. If you can save that cash in the business to build your inventory, you're better off. But reasonable salary, I think, I think it's going to vary from place to place. So I really can't pick a number. I'm sorry to bug out on that one.
Okay, thank you. I think we're right on time here, so I'm going to turn it over to Miguel here in a minute, and just a moment, and I'll put his webinar presentation on there and turn it over to Miguel Gomez as our next presenter. Miguel has been at Cornell since about 2008, is it, Miguel?
Correct.
And is in the department of, in the Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management. Does a lot of work on sort of behavioral type economics, I think, if I'm not incorrect, Miguel. And so he's going to talk today about customer satisfaction drivers and performance in cold climate tasting rooms, which is work that he has done as part of the Northern Grapes Project. And he just sent me a publication that I'm going to post on the website quite soon. So that'll have some of the information from this presentation in it as well. Okay, Miguel, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon for some, and for some good morning still. And thank you for attending the webinar. Let me know if my voice, if you're listening to me okay or not, and I will make adjustments here. So as Tim mentioned, this is part of the Northern Grapes Project, and this is a study that we did in collaboration with wineries in Iowa and New York that are participating in the project. So I want to say thank you to the wineries for cooperating, and also to my co-author, Erin Kelly, who is a graduate student in the Dyson School. So the title of the presentation is Customer Satisfaction Drivers. What drives customer satisfaction, and what are the implications for sales in cold climate tasting rooms? And this is an important question because, as we know, most of the emerging wineries in non-traditional regions depend on the tasting room, at least in the initial years, for their sales. So I am very confident in affirming that the tasting room is the most powerful marketing tool that new winemakers have. So I will go directly into, and this is, by the way, this is data that is from the wineries, from tasting rooms in the wineries collected this last year. So I'm going to give a brief outline of the presentation. First, I'm going to remind you why do we care about customer satisfaction when we think about the marketing strategy. Then, second, I will explain the Cornell study with wineries, tasting rooms in New York and Iowa, and briefly presenting an economic framework, what drives customer satisfaction, which is our big interest questions, and the most important question from a financial point of view, which goes back to Gregg's excellent presentation, is, well, should we care about customer satisfaction as we care about customer satisfaction as long as they help us increase our sales, increase our productivity in terms of enhancing sales and revenues. I will third explain the results, and I will give you the results in a nutshell here. First, the main drivers of customer satisfaction is service provided in the tasting room, that human component of interaction with the customer, and the ambience of the tasting room. And I will go into the detail of what that means. And the second main finding is that really increasing customer satisfaction leads to greater sales and to higher profits and to probability of buying again in the future, to get loyal customers. One thing that I have to mention here is that the difference is not, the key is not to just have customers satisfied. The key to really enhance sales, what we find in the study, is to move a customer, a visitor, from being satisfied to being extremely satisfied, to be delighted with the experience, and those are the customers that really make the difference in terms of the size of the ticket or the amount of money that they spend in a given visit. So, and I will finish with some concluding comments. So why focus on customer satisfaction here? It's a brief conceptual framework that allow us to understand the strategic role of customer satisfaction for any business, and in particular for a winery. You have your inputs that you employ, human resources. You have labor, you have the buildings, you have the wine, and you combine all them. If you use these inputs better, then the customer perception of your performance in a variety of attributes will increase, and if you are able to increase that, then the level of satisfaction of your customer or overall customer satisfaction goes up. That tends to increase over time customer loyalty and to lead to profitability. On the other hand, using the inputs mean costs that can affect can reduce profitability. So it is very, very important to find what is the appropriate level of effort in delighting the customers so that we are still profitable. So, and here are some facts that I hope will convince you that the customer satisfaction is a very important predictor of success. First, firms that cannot satisfy their customers are likely to lose market share to rivals that are offering better products and services at lower prices, maybe. And we know from marketing, from many, many studies in marketing, that the cost of attracting a new customer is 5 times higher than the cost of retaining an old customer. So it's good business to keep our customer base very happy. Finally, customer profitability tends to increase over time because those loyal customers are the most effective marketing tool through referrals. They are willing to pay price premiums. They become less sensitive to price changes, and they also tend to buy higher quantities. So those are why we care about customer satisfaction. Now, the research plan. So the purpose is, first, question 1, Q1, is to determine which attributes are driving customer satisfaction in these local wineries in emerging wine regions, in particular New York and Iowa. And there are so many attributes that make part of the customer experience, like friendliness of the staff, retail execution, the cost of the wine, the perception on the quality, etc. So we need to understand what's important, which ones of these attributes is really important for customers. And second, what are the links between having a highly satisfied customers and the behavior of this customer in terms of sales and the post-purchasing behavior, because that sometimes is as important as the actual sales in a moment, because it predicts the willingness to buy in the future and to recommend the winery to others. So this, and here we will highlight that the importance is of moving customers from being satisfied, and I will explain that briefly, to very satisfied, there's a score of 5. So let me show you, I will skip this economic conceptual framework. Just very briefly, first we identify what are the attributes that increase customer satisfaction. Q2A is what is the impact of overall customer satisfaction controlling for customer demographics, education, gender, etc. on sales, and and Q2B means how customer satisfaction impacts post-purchasing decisions. So let me tell you what we did with the wineries. So we developed a customer satisfaction survey in 6 tasting rooms, 3 in New York and 3 in Iowa. We collected data on the experiences and the level of satisfaction of over 350 customers. We collected more, but some of the responses we couldn't use because they answer the the survey instrument incompletely or clearly wrongly. So we did that this past year from June through November 2012. And again, thank you for the wineries that helped. And the survey was divided into three sections. One is a rating. We asked customers, the visitors, to rate from 1 to 5 the performance of the winery in 24 customer satisfaction attributes related to their tasting room experience. Second, we asked them about what did they buy, whether they buy, and how many bottles they bought, their intentions to buy again, and the likelihood of recommending the winery to others. And we also asked them for many demographic characteristics to control for those as we do our analysis. Okay, so just to show you the survey, to make this more concrete for you, this is a portion of the survey, and here in the first column you see the characteristics and the attributes that we are asking customers to rate. The first row means the overall tasting room experience. That will be our measure of overall customer satisfaction. A poor experience, poor rating will be rated as 1, and excellent will be rated as 5 for us to get some metrics. And after the second row and below, you can see the potential drivers of customer satisfaction. And here I am showing you a sample of them. They go from the winery signs and directions to ease of parking, to the grounds view, to overall tasting room cleanliness, to the wine knowledge of the pourer, the sommelier that is conducting the tasting, the appearance, the friendliness, the flexibility in the choice of wines in the tasting, how helpful were the tasting room staff, etc., etc. So you can see all those attributes. So we get from 1 to 5 a score on each one of them. The second part is to understand the behavior of the consumers. Are you planning, or did you purchase any wine after the tasting, yes or no? If the answer is no, we wanted to know what was the reason for not buying. And if yes, we asked them, number 3, how many bottles did you buy? And how much did you spend, or do you intend to spend in terms of dollars? And post-purchase behavior, the last set of questions, will you consider buying from this winery again? And we asked them very likely, likely, and unlikely. Same with the recommendations to others. Okay? So now, I'm going to go through this. Through this briefly, but I want to explain that this was an economic model and a statistical model, which I'm not going to show all the details, but some of the details will be available in the document that Tim Martinson mentioned to you at the beginning of my presentation. So basically, we are grouping the 24 attributes into 3 main factors that we call. One is ambience of the tasting room, the service, and the retail execution. And we use a technique called factor analysis in statistics. And factor analysis simply allows us to represent a set of variables in terms of a smaller hypothetical constructs, like in this case we call ambience, service, and retail execution. And the reason is that if we include too many attributes, 24 of them, trying to tease out the effect on overall satisfaction, it will be basically impossible, because we have some statistical problems. However, these techniques allow us to identify which attributes are the most important for each one of these factors that we call ambience, service, and retail execution. And this is what we found. And this is from the analysis of the 350 responses. So factor one, we call service. And we see that high level of satisfaction of service or low was driven by the bullet points that are in red. So basically, the person who is conducting the tasting, the pourer, was the key here in service. So the knowledge of the pourer, the appearance, presentation of the pourer, that it was well presented, that he was handsome or she was beautiful, and very friendly was very important. Among all those factors. The second factor we call retail execution, and what was very important in these two as a factor driving overall customer satisfaction was the three that are in red: availability of non-wine gift items, availability of food and snack items, including restaurants, and the presentation display of wines in the tasting room. So the ambience of the merchandising of the wines in the tasting room was important. And finally, in factor three, which we call ambience, it was very important, the assessment of the grounds view, the appearance of the grounds view, and the cleanliness, the perception on the cleanliness on the tasting room. I just want to note something here that, for example, we found that when I go to present this type of work on what drives customer satisfaction in tasting rooms, many people ask about, okay, is the cost of the tasting important? And in all the studies that I have done in wine, the cost of the tasting is not important it's not relevant for the level of satisfaction of the customer with the tasting room experience. So it's really not an important factor. We have found this in the Finger Lakes, in this study, and in other studies in Long Island. Okay, so now, so far we have identified what are the factors, but which ones are the most important factors that influence the happiness of the customer with the tasting room experience? And here we see them in order of importance. The first one by far is most important is service. And the bigger the bar, the most important this is. And I'm going to explain this. The meaning of these results is the following. So if you look at service, the first one, that size of the bar 0.4 indicates that customers that were 40% more likely to rank their overall experience as 5 over 5, excellent, extremely satisfied, instead of 4 over 5, just satisfied, if they were highly satisfied with service. So excellence in service increased the probability of being extremely satisfied by 40%, relative to being just satisfied, 4 over 5. So we can see the same with ambience. Ambience, customers were 30% more likely to rate their experience as 5 over 5 instead of 4 over 5 if they were highly satisfied with ambience. So the effect is important, but it's a little bit smaller than for service. And finally, very similar for retail execution, it's important, but it's the least important of all those. So if I am a tasting room manager, just by looking at these results, one thing is important to note. First, you would like to focus on service definitely rather than on retail execution. But if I have to choose between service and ambience, if you think about these two factors, service means you can modify your service performance much easier than modifying the ambience of the tasting room. Ambience of the tasting room may lead to, new design or new construction or opening windows or opening spaces, very expensive, capital expenses. But service, notice that is primarily the people that work in the tasting room. So as a tasting room manager, there are lots of things, improving service can get you a long ways in making customers happier. So that's the key there, overall satisfaction. Now let's focus on, okay, yes, I know that if I focus on service, having better, friendlier, very well presented and knowledgeable pourers, and very nice staff will increase my the overall satisfaction of customers, but does it matter for sales? And this graph shows you the essence of what we find. So in this graph, you see in the horizontal axis the different ratings. Customer satisfaction equal 2 is the blue one. Customer satisfaction 3 is the maroon, kind of reddish one. The green one is a satisfied customer, 4, and the orange one is a very extremely satisfied customer. And in the the vertical axis, we see how many bottles of wine these individuals bought, controlling for everything, controlling for the day of the week, the characteristics of the level of education, of income, everything of the consumers. And we see that a highly satisfied customer satisfaction equal 5, this person typically purchases 4 bottles of wine. The individual, the customer that was satisfied, customer satisfaction equal 4, the green one, purchased only a little bit less than 3 bottles in average in a visit. So being able to bring a customer from 4 to 5 means 1 more bottle. And that's a huge increase in productivity because you are using the same effort to sell the wine, but the size of the ticket of a highly satisfied customer is much bigger than that of a just satisfied customer. We see also that the difference between the jump is big between the green and the orange lines, but bringing a customer from 3 to 4 makes very little. And again, if you have a highly dissatisfied customer, then the average bottles sold to these customers drop dramatically to 1. So here the message is what matters is what happens on the extremes. You don't want to do very bad because you will probably lose that customer and he or she is not going to buy. But if you want to improve your performance, you need to convert as many clients as you can from to have a high an excellent experience. So the next slide is exactly the same. The only difference is that we are talking about dollars here, and you see very briefly the difference between a satisfied customer and a highly satisfied customer is about $20 from our sample of customers. So the satisfied customer the average size of ticket is $40. Highly satisfied is $60, $20 more. Now, the next one, we want to explore also, and with this I am about to finish, the likelihood of buying again. And we see, again, in the horizontal axis, we see our levels of satisfaction and the likelihood of buying again. Remember that 3 is very likely, 2 is just likely, and 1 is unlikely to buy again. And we see again that the highly satisfied customers tend to much likely, very likely buy again more than the rest. Although the difference is not as huge as in the actual purchasing behavior that we saw in the previous slide. And going to the next slide, likelihood to recommending others for each level of customer satisfaction. Here we see a very little difference between the 4s and the 5s. Both of them are are very likely to recommend the winery to others, although those that are highly satisfied, customer satisfaction equal 5, are 10% more likely to recommend this winery again in the future. So, to finish, we found that 3 drivers of customer satisfaction in tasting room to take into account: service, ambience, retail execution. And wineries that want to improve their customer satisfaction probably should focus more heavily on service than on retail execution, because they are more relevant for the level of satisfaction with the visit. And the biggest gains, again, to be made from moving customer satisfaction happen if you move them from being score you as from 4 to 5. This means fine-tuning every aspect of the tasting experience to ensure that we are able to delight the customer. Not just having happy customers, but extremely happy is what makes the difference. And we see that there are strong links between customer satisfaction and sales performance. It's clear that is important, and given that the lion's share of sales happen in the tasting room, then we should consider the tasting room as our most powerful tool in terms of marketing our winery. And the other thing to finish is that some of the wineries that we work with are going to continue tracking customer satisfaction and measuring how they are doing in customer satisfaction, because they see value on this. Systematic monitoring and analysis of customer satisfaction and sales provides information for tactical and strategic decisions. So with this, I finish. And thank you for your attention. And we can open to some questions if there are any. With a beautiful photograph of a vineyard.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Miguel. There are a few questions here. The first one is, can we get a copy of the survey? And I indicated that it might be part of that publication you put on, but I'm not sure of that. So
yes, the survey is in the publication. It's there, and what I recommend people interested on this is that you take this survey and you adapt it to your own conditions, because there may be other attributes that are important for you, and there may be others that are very irrelevant to what you do. So, but yes, feel free, and if you don't find it there, I can send it to you in an email. But it will be in the report.
Okay. So I have a question of my own for you, Miguel. I know a lot of wineries have tasting sheets that have descriptions of every wine on them, and a lot of information. So, is there a point at which it gets to be too much information, or is there, how much information? How does that figure in with the customer service and satisfaction?
Yes, oh, that's an excellent question. We did a study last summer as well, looking at descriptors in the tasting sheets. And we are finding that more information does very little for you. Less information tends to be better in terms of making people happier, and in terms of the amount of dollars they spend. So that's an interesting question, because sometimes we overwhelm customers with information. And in behavioral economics, we have these relatively new theories that say that excess information confuses consumers, and then they shy away from buying because it's just too complicated to process all the information.
Okay, I got 2 questions here. One from Carol Doolittle. Where do wineries owners find these super service pourers? And then one from Rob Vignan. Sorry, Rob, about your name. I don't know how to pronounce it. It says at small wineries it's normal to find only 1 employee per shift and expect a wait to be served. Do you think that adding another employee would increase the service enough to make up for the second employee's labor cost?
Yeah, I think those are two excellent questions, because what I show you in the conceptual framework, you may want having extremely happy customer satisfaction may not be a good thing for your profitability, because you have to pay more. And then that's what I think analysis like the one that Gregg showed us earlier are very important to understand. If we are able to increase our sales volume because of better customer satisfaction, how much are the extra benefits of doing that relative to the additional cost that you need to get, say, another person helping in the peak hours?
Okay.
And to the other question, I think it works in different ways. I have seen wineries it depends on the demographics of your customers. Let me give you a graphic example, if I may. Some of the wineries that are most successful here in the Finger Lakes used retired teachers, and they train them very well in tasting. And so these are very friendly people, very nice people, and they know how to educate the customer. So that works for them very well. In Long Island, on the other hand, what I have seen some cases that they hire, handsome young men or beautiful young women and train them in wine, and they are successful. So I think it depends on the type of customer that you get. So there is no one answer fits all response to that.
Okay, Matthew, I'm going to skip your question because I'm not, it just says, can we go back to the first slide on the 3 factors per moment? But maybe we can come back to it. But here's from Karine Pedneau from Quebec. Great talk. I'd like to know how many wineries participated and if there was any consideration regarding wine quality, grape varieties, sensory attributes, etc.
Yes.
And then, I'll go for a third one here. Let's see. Do you have any data as to how many of the survey people purchased half or case quantities?
Yes. Okay, there are 3 questions. First, in this study we had 6 wineries. So you have to, this is not, I'm not making inferences to the global industry, but these are indications that are relevant for this type of wineries. And we think that the wineries that we work well are representative of many new wineries in cold climate regions. The second question, yes. So quality, it's very, very, very important question. And as you see, we didn't consider quality here. We have included quality before as a factor in other studies that we have done in the Finger Lakes in past years and in Long Island. But the problem with the concept of quality, because we are asking the perception of quality, the customers that visit tasting rooms are too heterogeneous in terms of their perception of quality. Some of the customers just think that very sweet wine is the greatest thing. Others don't. So there are all range of levels of knowledge about wine, and it's just very difficult to include. We never found any significant effect about the perception of quality on overall satisfaction. I know Tim doesn't like that, but
no, I understand that. I want to go back to one from Leah Groby. Ambiance. How much do you recommend to spend on this for a small startup? Can you give me a rough idea?
Yeah. No, as I would say, my recommendation is to be very conservative in spending, because these are high upfront expenditures. I would say, you can make a tasting room very clean and neat. Even painting or doing things that are simple even so, some wineries we have seen that change the size of the windows, put different music or things like very little things may get you a long way. But I think I will emphasize better before ambience the issue of service. But I will be very cautious on making huge investments on ambience or redesigning the tasting room.
Yeah, I would think that cleanliness and personable tasting room staff would be the biggies, just according to your talk here. So let's see. I just a couple more design questions here. And this is from Tom Mincarelli. Is a tasting room in the bulk storage and barrel area recommended with an outside view as well? From Thomas Massey, have a certain shape or any special features of tasting bars been found to add or detract from customer satisfaction? Any tasting bar design recommendations? And I think I got that. Okay.
And I forgot to answer the question about the cases. And we didn't track cases, and yes, we didn't track cases. But okay, let's talk about the design of the bars. No, there is no clear evidence on what type of designs of the place where you are holding if it is round or if it is rectangular or the material or no. I think there is no evidence that what works better. And the second one, I think that the idea of having outdoor bringing the tasting experience outdoor is very attractive. If you have a very nice view and you have the vineyard nearby and a nice ambience on surrounding, is great. I have seen that working very well for some of the vineyards, and this is just by observation, and probably Tim can adapt to this.
Okay, I think we're going to have to maybe cut it off there. I'm going to ask you one more question here, but before I do, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. If you want to hear it again, we're going to do it again at 7 o'clock. But we would like you to click on this link I just posted down at the bottom and fill out our exit survey. And I'm interested in particular as to if you've been to more than one of these, what you like about the series and suggested topics for future surveys. This is our last one of the season, as I mentioned, but we're going to have another 5 or 6 of these next winter. So let's see, what's the last question here? I'm looking at one here. Okay, here's one from Basso Gantotti. How critical was the price point versus quality in influencing customer purchasing decisions?
Yes. So in the studies that we have done so far, pricing is not a huge determinant of customer satisfaction. And again, with the issue of quality, I know that it is very important to balance, the right price for the right quality. But unfortunately, for the type of customers that we see in the tasting rooms in these regions, there is a lot of education to do with them, and it is very difficult to determine. The customers are just so different in terms of what they value in the wine that we didn't get any meaningful message from those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to cut it off there. Thank you, Miguel and Gregg, for a wonderful webinar. And I hope those of you that are listening, that some of you at least are making money or on the road to making money with your businesses out there. And as I mentioned, this is the last Northern Grapes webinar of the season. So please, before you leave, click on the link and fill out our exit survey. And thank you very much for attending.